All right, let's talk about it. There's one more quarterfinal to get through here. Chicago Red Stars on the road. They're going to be facing off against San Diego Wave FC at 10 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. San Diego Wave, the number 3 overall seed in the NWSL. What a season for this team going up against 6-seeded Chicago Red Stars. Let's talk about these two teams, their histories against each other, Lisa, and let's try our best to make a couple picks.
We will try our best to make picks. It's only like one of my favorite parts of what we do here at Attacking Third. These two sides, right? During the season, they did not play each other during the Challenge Cup in different divisions, Chicago in the Central region and San Diego in the Western region, along with the other California side and the teams in the Pacific Northwest. San Diego won both of the meetings between the Wave and Chicago this year. 2-1 scoreline and then a 1-0 scoreline away. That match was at Soldier Field. It was a doubleheader with the Chicago Fire. So a lot of hype around that game, which hopefully gives these teams a little bit of a similar vibe heading into this, because Chicago has the advantage in terms of postseason, right? I mean, this is the Red Stars' 7th straight postseason appearance, but they've never won. They came very close last year. They made it to the final against Washington Spirit and end up losing in that championship, but they have the experience. They have the know-withal to be there and to know what they're doing. Even when you look at the personnel, Vanessa DiBernardo, Danielle Colaprico, they've played in every single Chicago playoff game in club history. DiBernardo, she has started in every single playoff game in Chicago club history. So the experience for this Chicago side is completely there. But it doesn't mean that San Diego has none. As an expansion side, they are riding so high on the regular season that they just finished up. I mean, they sat at number 1 for about 8 to 10 weeks of this regular season, sitting at the top of the standings, winning games, being defensive powerhouses. And as an expansion side, I want to give a lot of credit to Casey Stoney, because she built this team with everything that she had in her, and she developed a chemistry with these players. It's such a great mix of younger players. They've got Jaden Shaw, the 17-year-old, Naomi Girma, the rookie, who's now with the national team, probably going to be their starting center back moving forward. She's got veterans like Alex Morgan, Kaylin Sheridan. So despite Chicago being in the playoffs for 7 straight years, San Diego has 7 players that have also been in playoffs in the NWSL. It's Alex Morgan, Abby Dahlkemper, Mackenzie Doniak, Katie Johnson, McNabb, Sheridan, Jody Taylor. So there are players with experience and big time players, right? So I think to really so much of this that it comes down to is availability. Yeah. And I'm going to be honest with the people joining us live right now. I don't know the availability of Alex Morgan, of Abby Dahlkemper, of Katie Johnson, of Taylor Korniak, Amira Ali. These are players that did not play in the final regular season game for Casey Stoney. You look at someone like Morgan, Taylor Korniak, even Dahlkemper, they did not go with the United States. Korniak and Morgan, due to injury, they did not travel to Europe with the United States as internationals. So their availability is a big old mystery to me. Yeah. And I think the availability of those specific players, Morgan, Korniak, I'm going to say Amira Ali as well, changes how this game will play out 100%. Because Morgan, of course, Golden Boot winner, 15 goals on the year. Korniak, the midfielder who has developed such a great relationship and a chemistry with Morgan. Amira Ali, who has stepped into this San Diego team and just wreaked havoc up top. There are so many different pieces. Now, defensively, San Diego is going to be fine. They've been without Dahlkemper for a great chunk of this season. Yeah. They've got McNabb in the back. They've got Real. They've got Girma that are just doing so well. Westfall, Pogarch, like the defensive efforts, Sheridan, of course, between the sticks is there for San Diego. And I don't think that's going to be a drop off. It's just if they can score goals, because last regular season game, of the year against North Carolina, ended in a 0-0 draw. And San Diego didn't need that win. It would have helped them get a bit of a higher seeding, but they didn't need that win. So I'm curious if we saw the rest from players like Morgan, Korniak, Ali, because it wasn't a postseason game. And even if they are only 60%, it's now the postseason, they're going to play. This is a game that is a must win for San Diego. They have got to get this win. It's at home. I think playing at Snapdragon gives them the advantage over Chicago to some extent. But I mean, Chicago's an incredibly talented team. We just talked about the experience that they have. You look at someone like Mallory Pugh, 11 goals, 6 assists on the year. She's the first player since Marta in 2017 to score more than 10 goals and 5 assists in the same season. And this is a player that was missing for some of it due to international duty. So I think the battle between Pugh and Alex Morgan is going to be there. That's something that's going to be there. But I think defensively, I know we talked about this with the first matchup between Houston and Kansas City. Is it going to come down to the goalkeepers? But between San Diego and Chicago, I think it's going to come down to the midfield and then the front line. And if San Diego has their strength and has their healthy players, it'll be a different game for them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually think that that's a little bit of commonality between these two teams going into this game, that there are some variables or unknowns about or around availability or, level of fitness or where, players might be at on both sides of the ball. You listed off a ton of key, not just any players, but really key impactful players for San Diego. And what that could look like come kickoff and what the status of their availability is. And I'm not talking about like the, the availability report that randomly drops, 4 hours before the next day kickoff. Yeah. Like, those are all filled with questionable things, right? Teams will utilize those as they determine. But like the actual facts and availability of players and how they feel and how they are.
And if they're on minute restriction, right? Like it's one thing if you're training and practicing, getting touches on the ball, but if you're non-contact, if you have minute restriction, so does that mean you're going to start the game? Does that mean you're going to be warming up for the first 60 minutes and come in at the last 30? Like there's just
and what did the coaching staff, feel like the best method is within those scenarios, and I think similar to San Diego, it's similar to Chicago. I think, look, they know they're going to be without Bianca St. George's. She was, issued the immediate red, and then the disciplinary committee issued another additional game suspension. She will not be available for the Red Stars, in this quarterfinal. That's like the one true thing that we know. There's similar to Alex Morgan, Mal Pugh did not make the trip during the international window to Europe, and maybe a part of it was to prepare for this game and ensure that you rest up and have a full week of rest going up, into this NWSL quarterfinal. Taylor Korniak named to that roster, but ultimately removed, right? Was there actually something there that they felt was a little bit bigger, which indicates you should probably not make this trip in the hopes to participate in a quarterfinal. Aaron Wright for the Chicago Red Stars, another player that we're looking at, someone who has been on and off constantly throughout the entirety of the regular season, has literally been sacrificing her lower torso for the Chicago Red Stars this season. And they'll have Zoe Morse back, right, who missed that last regular season game due to a double yellow red card, but will be available and back for this game against San Diego. And I think if you're looking for the silver lining within the possibility of availabilities, Zoe Morse is a big one for this Chicago Red Stars team. So I think that's actually the one of the commonalities between these two teams, that there's some unknowns there, right, in terms of players and how they'll be ready to go for this game. I'm sure if you ask any one of them, they're going to say, we're ready. It's a playoff game. Let's go. Right. Of course. Like that's it. But what is that going to mean for the type of soccer that we're going to see on the pitch? right? Like, what is that going to mean in terms of like, is it going to be sophisticated soccer? Is it just going to be a little bit of a grind? It's going to be a bit of a battle. Is this going to be more defensive? I mean, listening to you, talk about the availabilities or unavailabilities for this game for the back line, that's not to say that San Diego doesn't have a capable defensive shape. I mean, they've got Kaylin Sheridan in net, and then they've got Naomi Irma, who's anchoring.
I think they have that defensive shape completely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and then I think even looking at Chicago, when you mentioned like somebody like a Zoe Morse coming back in, and then you have her alongside somebody like a Tatum Milazzo, right? The near Iron Women for Chicago this year. I think that helps sustain. It's sort of been a bit of their strongest pairing at times. So I'm absolutely looking at that. And then of course you were forgetting Alyssa Nair, right, for Chicago in terms of that defensive shape as well. So just looking at even the last couple times that these two teams met, right? Again, not massive kind of blowout types of games. Especially that more recent one where it was at a big stadium with a big crowd, a narrow 1-0 loss to Chicago, sort of coming out of that CONCACAF W championship, and team unable to walk away with points in that one. And talking to Chicago Red Stars players about it in the build up to, in the winding down of the regular season and in the build up to these playoffs, hearing them say that there were a couple games towards that second half of the season that they looked at and said, this is a game where we should have walked away with points, and games specifically that they went back to look at and try to work on things in terms of correcting errors that might have been made. And that San Diego Wave FC game at Soldier Field was absolutely one of them. So I'm very curious to see how the adjustments are made and how they're shaped. Look, we talked about this Houston Kansas City game, about the concept of a 12th player, right? Having the scene set, having the environment for you. This team and franchise, they've moved. They're officially a team that plays in Snapdragon Stadium. So massive
and they can pack it. And we've seen the fans show up to Snapdragon in San Diego for this Wave side, and that's an advantage for San Diego.
Yeah, and I think if you're a visiting side going into that, whether you're Kansas City going to Houston or whether you're Chicago going to San Diego, you're maybe partially motivated by that in some capacity.
Yeah,
I mean, we hear from players all the time in the league that even if they're the opposition or the visiting side, they are thrilled to go into stadiums that have these types of scenes. There's probably no better feeling than getting a win in front of a capacity crowd as the visiting side.
Huge.
So, San Diego has had one sellout in Snapdragon already. I wouldn't be surprised if closer to the game they get a little bit closer to that as well. And that will have to be one of those things that Chicago maybe tries to turn into an opportunity, because another thing that we haven't talked about here is Chicago doesn't have a great record on the road this year. They're better at home, quite frankly. And this is where, while it's a great accomplishment for this franchise and this club and those players to have put together the season that they have under the circumstances which have presented itself to them, is incredibly admirable, but it's affected them in their seeding, and they're going in here as a 6 seed. And no matter what happens in these playoffs, they will always be on the road, and they don't have a good road record. So it's like similar to Houston, Kansas City. This game was also a struggle for me to make a pick, because similar to Kansas City, we've also been high on San Diego. I'm with you 100% on everything that you've mentioned with this franchise. I mean, there's so many things for this club to be proud of coming into their expansion year, their inaugural season. Casey Stoney adapting very quickly to the NWSL and styles and coaching this team through it. This team never fell out of the top half of the standings. They frequently were in first place throughout it, and they ended up locking up a number 3 seed, and the ability to host a game.
Yep.
I don't imagine that they're going into this with shaky knees and lack of confidence. They're not that type of expansion team.
No.
They've shown that throughout the entire season. So I don't know. It sounds like, listening to you talk a little bit about it, something you think this game, you think that the first quarterfinal is actually going to have the goals, and you think this one's going to be more narrow?
I do.
Okay.
I do think this game between Chicago and San Diego is going to have a more narrow score line. Just because defensively, honestly, like this is no knock against Franch and Campbell, but I think when you look at Sheridan and Nair, I mean, like these are top.
Yeah,
these are like the top goalkeepers in the world that we're talking about. All four of them. But especially when you look at Sheridan and Nair, like this is world champion goalkeeper in Alyssa Nair, and then you've got Olympic gold medalist in Kaylin Sheridan. So it's top notch. I mean, it comes down to availability, and unfortunately, we're not going to know that until. Honestly, I'm going to be really honest with everyone listening and joining us live. We are not going to know the availability until 10 p.m. Eastern when this game kicks off. And we see, okay, Alex Morgan is starting, Taylor Korniak starting, or, they're available on the bench. Like, honestly, we're not even going to know until the game is over and we see how many minutes they get, because we don't know where they are and kind of how that plays out. Just being honest with everyone.
I'm with you. I'm with
playoffs. We're honest.
No, that's a huge part of why like making a pick for this one has been difficult. So look, you went first for your pick in the last one. I'll do you the favor and go first with this one. I'm with you 100%. I do feel like this could be a type of narrow scoreline game. I think that actually works in a certain team's favor, if I'm being quite frank. And it's also the playoffs, right? It's tough to get like these sort of high scoring blowout type of games. That it's not something that's typically what we've seen when it comes to the NWSL post season. And I think thinking about the availability reports, knowing that we're going to get them at the time that we're going to get them, if for whatever reason we see San Diego has Taylor Korniak unavailable, and for the Red Stars, Morgan Gautrat is still available and ready to go. She's a player who literally has built her minutes towards the perfect time for this Red Stars team. And if the Wave have Korniak unavailable and Morgan Gautrat is ready to go in this playoff final, the Chicago Red Stars are going to win this quarterfinal. I'm going with the Chicago Red Stars. You're not going to have me, the girl from Chicago, come on to a live show and pick against the Chicago Red Stars. Who do you think I am? I'm exactly who you think I am.
I would expect nothing less. I would expect nothing less from you,
I'm absolutely
Sandra.
going with them. But I think, I really do think that if this is a manageable type of game where Chicago can somehow get that moment of brilliance, which we have seen quite often this season from somebody like Mal Pugh, and get that kind of narrow 1-0 scoreline, that they will succeed and find themselves in another semifinal. Chicago found themselves carrying 1-0 scorelines all the way through last year's playoffs, all the way to the championship final.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do they end up winning an NWSL championship?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't know. Because here's the other thing.
We'll take it one game at a time. But I had to ask.
As of right now, this second, that can change after this quarterfinal.
For sure.
And if I'm correct, I might absolutely change it. But, you have to look at, what's available and the circumstances around it, But as of right now, this October 13th, Thursday recording, I think it's a very, very tall hill, higher than it's ever been before for the team in all of their playoffs. And they have 7 different, seasons of playoff history that they can look at. And there were some,
and they've never done it.
There were some pretty good teams that they went up against. And I think that that's also true this year, but the expanded playoff format and the teams in front of them as well, I think it's even higher and elevated than it's been before. But who knows? That could be another motivating factor for this team. So I'm going Chicago 1-0. How about you?
I love that you're going with Chicago. I would expect nothing less from you, Sandra. I'd actually be disappointed if you didn't go with Chicago. In this match, San Diego versus the Red Stars, I think it'll be a narrow score line. I think we may even go into overtime, maybe penalty kicks. Honestly, like I think this game will really be a grind. Availability, right? Like I can't stress that enough. Availability yeah. For both sides of these teams. But when it comes down to it, it's Mallory Pugh against Naomi Girma. It is Yuki Nagasato against Kailen Sheridan. It is that front line of Chicago against San Diego's back line, because Chicago has not been known to score a plethora of goals, especially on the road. And if San Diego can keep a shutout, they will win this game hands down. And I think that they can do that. I think that with Kailen Sheridan in the back, I think with Naomi Girma, I've just been so impressed with her. Eggman in the midfield. Like there are just so many great pieces from the San Diego side that even without Alex Morgan, without Taylor Korniak, without Katie Johnson, Dahlkemper, even if none of those players are available, San Diego is going to get the win over Chicago, advance to play Portland. I'm going with San Diego.
I love it. We're each going for a different team in each of the quarterfinals. I love it. Big fan of that personally.
We did not plan this either. Before the recording, we didn't tell each other. We don't tell each other who we're picking,
on purpose,
what we're doing, who we're going with.
Yeah, no, it sets up, I think, for a better recap, quite frankly. Yeah. So we'll see how that happens. It's here. Exciting to chat about all of this with you, Lisa, and we're going to keep recapping it and previewing it all along through the NWSL playoffs. And hopefully everybody joining us live can continue to join us throughout the remainder of these playoffs. That's all we've got for you today. Make sure you watch the NWSL quarterfinals. Houston Dash hosting Kansas City Current, 5 p.m. Eastern on Paramount Plus. San Diego Wave hosting Chicago Red Stars, 10 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network.